I'm delighted now to welcome our panellists for the next session, who formed part of the working group which developed the DITT programme. Ian Haynes, tax consultant and chair of Tax Technology Committee at CFE Tax Advisors Europe, Paul Appin OBE, board member of the Office of Tax Simplification, HMRC Admins Burden and Advisory Board, and Shan Sun, tax technology lead at Deliveroo. Perhaps Ian, I can first come to you, and I'd like to kick off this session with the vision for the development of the programme.
Right.
Perhaps we'll talk about why must anything be done about digitalisation?
Very good question. It's one that goes over and over in my head. And I think the answer is because it's a course that has been set. It was started really by Gordon Brown in the noughties, and there was a decision then taken that the Revenue Administration in this country, HMRC, would begin to adopt a digitalisation programme. And that basically means converting analogue systems into digital systems, which are easier to use, and they produce benefits in terms of the number of staff you need, and also in the way that data that is given is held. Unfortunately, digitalisation also means that there is a change in the need for skills, work skills, and that is something that HMRC has been facing. If you remember, there were well over 35,000 job losses or reductions in staff for HMRC, and that really reflected what was going on underneath the scenes in terms of this moved to digital, to the extent that there were very large numbers of individuals working with HMRC who had phenomenal skills in tax knowledge and in the systems, the analogue systems that were there. They were offered the opportunity of retraining to begin to learn the digital systems that were coming in. They were offered redundancy. And I think a lot of them decided that that was the point at which they were going to go. And since then, we have seen the gradual rollout of Making Tax Digital by HMRC and the problems associated with that. The problems they've got are that they have to keep the analogue system going while the digital system is being developed. And that creates problems for taxpayers and their advisors. And I think a lot of the issues that we as a profession have seen have been complaints related to seeking to upkeep the analogue system whilst at the same time seeking to develop the digital system. But, and I think it's where we came in, CIOT, in the council, we had an away day, a strategy discussion day, and we had advice given a very helpful lady, Candice Bordeaux, who actually began talking then about taxologists. Well, taxologists is a funny word, and we're tax advisors, and we remain tax advisors, I think. But what we learned was that there were things that we needed to do, that we needed to be leaders, we need to think for our members as well as for the world generally. We're a charity, an educational charity, and suddenly we were aware that here was something that was happening in front of our eyes where the skill set that we had, a little bit like the skill set of HMRC before their process started, is very similar. And then we have the realization that we have to do the same as them. And it was that started the thoughts of how do we go about doing that? What are we going to do? We consulted with the big four, medium-sized firms, small firms, business, individuals, academics, to get from them their views of what should be done. And what came out from that was that there is a whole process that is required, but we've got to start somewhere. And where we decided that we would start was with a diploma in tax technology, set at a level 4, which is, if you like, a sort of first year degree level. and that would supply the working tools that somebody who needs to continue in a professional life will probably need as they go forward. And in that respect, we'll maybe talk about that later on, what is within that diploma. But it is very much seen as a great grounding, a foundation, which will enable somebody who wants to go on and deal with tax in today's world and in the future world to know what to do and where to get information where they don't know what to do. So why must anything be done about digitalization? It's because it's here, it's not going to go away. HMRC is not able to go back because all of those guys who were tax inspectors, they're all on the Riviera probably enjoying sunshine while we're here. But we need to face the fact that we have got this, for me, brilliant future coming. And the only thing I regret is I haven't got an additional 30 years to add on to my career.
Thank you. I don't know, perhaps Paul, given your extensive experience of tax in practice, how relevant is the course to somebody in practice?
I think it's going to be very relevant, Susan. I spent 40 years in general practice and I've been very closely involved in the development of the syllabus for this qualification. And if I think back over maybe the last 25 years in practice, we've seen a dramatic change in the way technology affects the way we do tax. From digitalization of forms, electronic filing, automation of computations and calculations, with MTD for ITSA coming down the road, we're seeing more and more software that's using technologies that perhaps we don't often think about, like optical character recognition, like robotic process automation, like artificial intelligence, like data analytics, data visualization. Those all sound like big complex concepts, but actually most of them are contained in a mobile phone that we use every day in preparing accounts. So it's not just the journey we've travelled for the last 25 years, it's where we are now, and I think possibly even more importantly, it's where we go next, because every practice, whether it's Big Four or sole practitioner, is really going to be affected by developments in technology. I've talked about the kind of tools we use in practice, but we've also got to be aware that revenue authorities are using technology in a completely different way. Data analytics, artificial intelligence, they're using these tools to target inquiries more accurately. And if we don't know how they're using those tools and how they're targeting, I don't think we can serve our clients properly. So in a nutshell, for me, yeah, absolutely. This is a qualification that will work as much for the sole practitioner as for someone in a Big Four and as for someone who's a tax practitioner in business.
So I suppose that's a bit about the challenges those technology, advancements are facing us. So is there something specific, just to give us maybe one example in relation to the qualification that would really help people?
Yeah, I think perhaps the most important thing is being aware of the breadth and the speed of change. Everybody, I think, is quite rightly focused on making tax digital for ITSA at the moment, but that's only one very small part of the digital transformation we're seeing in tax. What I think the qualification will help people do is see just how broad that digital canvas is. I really worry that we're all so focused on one small thing and we're missing everything else that's happening out there in the peripheral vision. That's what I think this qualification will do, give us all a better idea of the tech that's out there and how we can actually make practical use of it.
Thank you, Paul. That's really interesting. Perhaps coming to you, Shan, now, with a focus more specifically on industry. Why do you think this course is important for tax people in industry?
Yeah, of course. So for me, working in the industry in the past, tax tend to work in silos. So we have our specialized knowledge, we have our spreadsheet being sent to us and we work on it. But with technology and data becoming more dominant in terms of how business operates, how we deal with day-to-day work, tax find themselves has to go out to talk to unfamiliar territories like IT, software developers, suppliers in this regime. So that creates a knowledge gap. So this course is created to cover that knowledge gap. On the other hand, tax technology is a very new industry. To be fair, in my previous life, I'm a transfer pricing person. So I come in, client normally already have a transfer pricing issue, and you know one transfer pricing issue would arise, and you will address that question and solve the problem. But for tax technology, the projects or even the products can be anywhere. Then you need to talk to IT, compliance, risk, finance, legal. You talk to all of these people, and you have to discover what kind of problem is, and you have to frame it yourself and find the solutions afterwards. So the syllabus we designed is more giving you a framework or where to start to ask these questions, prioritize it, to try to see how you can actually maximize your impacts with minimum effort to start with, and maybe giving even a longer term benefit to your business as a tax professional in business.
That's really helpful, because that's one of the things I was going to ask you about, was actually how, if you're a tax professional and you don't know anything about IT, and I probably count myself in that. So normally I would rely on the IT department, and I'd go off to them and go, well, how do I do this? What do I do? Is it going to give us the tools, by studying this programme, to be able to have those kind of conversations?
Yeah. As Paul and Ian both mentioned, the course wasn't really quite designed to give you a specific tutorial to one tool. To be honest, I think the suppliers of those toolings are giving you very good tutorials in general. What we're trying to address is giving you a breadth of selection, what is possible and what you could be looking into a little bit more. And to be honest, like right now, a lot of firms probably have no low code or no code environment they can work on, or if they're lucky, they even have engineers specifically working on tax projects. But a lot of times right now, people are focusing more on automation or transformation, almost equivalent as an equivalent to tax technology. What I wanted to say is tools that you have is really means to the end, but it's not the end state. And tax technology is at the infancy state. What we're looking at is really setting up your database, having one single source of truth, so you can actually develop more analytics or insights that you can add more value to business. So it's a lot more to come. The syllabus is giving you a breadth of an understanding where you could go next to yourself, so that you don't feel too clueless afterwards. We also have two routes in these qualifications. Those a bit more technical side for people who wanted to learn more tools, programmings, to know where they could start. We also have the ones that aims at people more on the management side, where they just wanted to know how they could manage a tax technology project or a tax technology product if it's relevant for them. So I think there's quite a lot going on going forward to look forward to, but right now the syllabus is giving a starting point.
So sort of building blocks, but
yes.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for those responses. Now, I'm conscious of the fact we've got lots of questions coming in on Slido, perhaps, so I'll go to that. But if you haven't asked your question already and you want to on Slido, you go to www.slido.com and enter the code #DITT 2022. So perhaps if I look at some of those questions as we've got at the moment, maybe if I come to you, Ian, actually, because you haven't answered a question for a moment. What is the technical level of the DITT qualification? Will I be out of my depth, bear in mind what I've just said about my technical ability?
I don't think you would. I think anybody with a reasonable understanding would be able to understand how digital technology works. This course is not about teaching programming. You need to go further down the line to deal with that. It is actually enabling somebody who deals with tax to begin to get a familiarity with this new world, and it is a new world. I think when we look back at this period, we will actually see what is happening now in a similar light to when we look back to the 19th century and look at the Industrial Revolution. It is changing everything. Now, the problems that we address within the diploma are specifically directed at the problems that are there now for our members, the real problems associated with MTD, but also seeking to put those in context. Mm-hmm. I think, if I may, I've just very quickly put a wider view so that people can see exactly where this is. And the wider view is that the OECD, which is, as you know, the organisation for all revenue administrations and governments, or not all but most, developed ones, they have a committee, the Forum of Tax Administrations, which is the individual revenue bodies of each of those countries. And they produced in 2020 a document, Digital Transformation of Tax Administrations. I noticed that Shan used the word transformation, not digitalization. And that is the key word, digital transformation of tax administration. This book you can download for free, and it's absolutely magnificent source of information. Now, that there is a steering group of countries for that review and change, of which HMRC is one. And where is that going? It is going to a completely new system where digital technology will actually completely replace the systems that are analog systems. We will have seamless interrelationship between revenue programs and customers programs or databases. And because that is seamless, there will be no human intervention or minimal human intervention. That means that the amount of effort and resource that needs to be put into seeking to track down fraud will just disappear. There are some words that will come up: compliance by design. In other words, that the systems that will be there will be designed for the benefit of both the taxpayer and the revenue, so that these processes that were there in the past will disappear, and there will be a far more an element of cooperation. And this brings in the word agile, which is a word in common use, but which for software purposes has very, very specific meanings in terms of how you contract manage and do things. And part of that is working together compliantly. Embedding is another word that will be there, because revenue systems will be embedded in company systems, in personal taxation systems. And the word that, when I came across it, it really did make my hair stand on end, is rules as code. Now, rules as code, it's the one definition I'll read out to you, which is that, excuse me a minute, it's here, the process of drafting rules in legislation, regulation and policy in machine consumable languages, so they can be read and used by computers. So in other words, the statutes that you and I know and love and have gone almost blind reading over and over and over will disappear. Now, how can we as tax professionals relate to this? That is down the line, but that is where HMRC are driving. So we need to say we get on the train now as it leaves the destination. There's no ultimate destination, but there is a terminal from which we will leave, and we need to get on board now, so that down the line we are able to work with the revenue and work for the interests of our clients as continuing tax advisors, and having there all of those lovely things that we do about privilege and confidentiality, and ensure that that's there. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I've just got quite a few questions coming in, so I'm going to see what we can manage to get through. But bearing in mind what you've just said, actually, and then I think something that Paul mentioned earlier, which was MTD, which is, I know, getting into the specific, but actually we have had a question around that. What further developments will there be after MTD, do you think, and will it cover MTD, more importantly?
The course does cover MTD. Again, I think the developments beyond MTD are potentially far more important. MTD is a building block, and the bit that people generally don't see is what's happening within HMRC. Within HMRC, we've got the Enterprise Tax Management Platform, which is bringing together data from different taxes. If I hear one grumble from practitioners at the moment, and I hear lots, one is HMRC's systems just aren't joined up. ETMP is the thing that will join them up. that's a bit of MTD that we don't generally talk about. Where could that lead? Where will it lead? It'll lead onto a single customer record, bringing all that joined up information together, and from that, a single customer account. That will enable HMRC to do far more in terms of pre-population. That could completely transform the way we do tax returns from the current system of we send HMRC the data, they may or may not compare it with data they already have and may or may not trigger an inquiry, to a system where more and more information is just going to be there on screen for you to check. And I think for practitioners that brings a lot of questions to the fore. Who's responsible for the accuracy of that information? It's the client, practitioner, HMRC, the data providers. The way tax is done is going to be transformed. So way beyond MTD, I think there are developments we need to be thinking about now, because they will change our day-to-day work.
I can't help but ask this question, I'm afraid, because it is linked to MTD, and it's one that's come up, is that why are HMRC taking so long? Is it that you were just explaining about the systems part of it?
We've got another 3 hours.
Well, no, we haven't, but perhaps it's just a quick answer, because it's linked obviously to the question you just answered, I think. Okay,
let me give you the 60-second answer to this. Don't time me, please. MTD for VAT was really pretty simple. Something like 96% of businesses were already filing their VAT returns online. All that changed with MTD was the route through which they file those VAT returns. MTD for ITSA is a completely different beast, especially now we have basis period reform, especially now that we have a whole new penalty system, all designed to come into place in April 2024. There are numerous technical issues, and all of those technical issues have to be resolved, and they have to be resolved for 4.5 million businesses and landlords by April 2024. I think HMRC have now realised that this is actually a much more complex problem than they originally thought. So for me, the thing that's mission critical is the pilot. Until all of those different permutations have been fed through the pilot and we know that it's going to work, I think April 2024 looks very, very, very challenging. I was tempted to say very, 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 very challenging, and actually I think I will.
I want to just add one thing. Just as MTD is a living project, keep evolving, our syllabus is also a living animal, if you like. We will be updating them frequently, as much as we could, to keep up with the technology change. So it's not going to stay still, just as today. It's just a launch today.
Which, it was, funny enough, sort of when looking at one of the other questions, bearing in mind I said that I'm not very good at IT, so maybe I need some help with this, but you know, there's a bit of me that says, what's wrong with what we do at the moment?
You can sign up for the course, Susan.
Maybe I will. But you know, what's wrong with the way we're doing things at the moment, and you know, trying to incorporate that together with digitalisation in tax. I mean, it's such a big change, and it's such a big topic. So perhaps you can give me a little bit of a flavour.
It is a massive change, and I think in short terms, it's the fact that you've got the movement from an analogue system, not to a fully completed digital system, but to the next stage. The whole process of getting to down the line has got a number of stages. Eventually, I mean, one of the issues about income tax and corporation tax is the way that you actually calculate profits. Now, one of the things that will be really, I think, subject to scrutiny down the line is whether we actually want that form of taxation at all. If you think about the way that people employed are reducing in numbers, are we going to see at some stage that the significant amount of revenue that's generated from income tax and national insurance will be being depleted to such an extent that other systems of taxation will need to be devised? And if that happens, then they will be quite clearly far more friendly to a digital environment than income tax is, or corporation tax. But at the moment, we need to work with those and the problems associated with that. Corporation tax, we've got this acceptance and agreement of a minimum level of corporation tax for M&Es. The only way that's going to work out is if we have some form of AI developed so that the profits can be allocated. That was not really fully recognised, I think, by the people who sat down and thought this is a good idea. It is a good idea, but my goodness me, there is so much that needs to be put into it. And that, in some ways, answers the question, what are tax advisors going to be doing for the next 50 years? Well, I think that may be one of the things.
I've got so many questions after that, more to do with tax legislation. But anyway, moving on to some of the questions we've actually got. I guess, well, maybe it's not that. It's perhaps linked to the fact that we were talking about HMRC and MTD, really, actually. So what are people going to do if they can't use tax technology? They're a Luddite. So going forward, how do you think we're going to be able to cope with that as a whole tax community?
Well, I'll do that and pass to you. But I think that is a question that applies not just to tax, it applies in so many areas. Mm-hmm. If you like, the digitally unpossessed, and that it for a little bit like what happened with Gordon Brown's problem, or that he solved with mass redundancies. People will say, well, no, we don't need to do that. I'm not going to do that, and that's it. So that we will need to keep that analog system alive for a while, but at some stage a line is going to be drawn, and then we must rely on a general education of the public at large, and that's the only way that's going to happen. Down the line, the actual digital world will be seamless, and actually we won't see it, we'll just use it. You don't need to understand how a typewriter works to actually type something out on a thing, but it works. And we will use systems, and that's all we will need. And there will be people who are behind the scenes ensuring that they work. And in tax, what we want to see is that Central will be the tax advisor of the future. Our successors that are doing that.
Paul, do you want to add to that?
I think it just comes down to, as accountants in business, we want to operate as efficiently and as profitably and deliver as good a service to our clients as we possibly can. Digital technology isn't a magic wand, but it is a tool that we can use to run our own businesses more efficiently, to provide a better service to clients, to maintain profitability at a time when I think we're all feeling strangled by red tape and governance and all of that stuff that we have to cope with. Technology is the thing that can free up time for us. So it is a choice. Nobody's going to be compelled to use it. But I think if we're thinking about how we provide the best service to clients and how we do that profitably, to ignore technology would be a pretty disastrous course.
I'm moving on to some of the other questions we've got here, and perhaps this one's quite interesting. In relation to the qualification, is it very UK-centric, or is it transferable to tax professionals working outside the UK? And you mentioned transfer pricing earlier, so I was just quite interested. I don't know if somebody can cover that, maybe?
The bulk of the course, I think, it is eminently transferable. The basic digital tools, the basic technologies, I think you'd come across wherever in the world you were in practice in tax. There are some elements that are very UK-centred, but let's just say the course is adaptable so that those blocks could be adapted for other countries if we ever needed to.
I think it's also a bridge, serve as a bridge between tax and finance. I think that's probably the area that work most closely with tax team. If you pay attention to tax technology, there is also fintech up and coming very much. So they're basically being trained very similarly onto the digital world, which is taxes. This course is designed more leaning towards the tax applications, but it's also touching on what the finance has been changing in the auditing world as well. So I think in terms of transferability, it's definitely can help on that sense. And a lot of the things that we're trying to cover in, especially in the management route, is also giving a framework for you to think and then how to manage current technology projects. For that's basically transferable to all areas of business, if you like.
Could I just say that we already have another revenue, or another tax advisory organisation who is seeking to use some of the modules that we've created because they fit absolutely in with what they're doing.
That's fantastic. I'm just looking at some of the other questions we've got. I've got some around people who already work in tax technology, and then whether we think the qualification would be really good for them. If there's anything particular you wanted to say around that, bearing in mind what I said earlier about my IT skills. But if they're already in tax technology, do you think the subjects that will be covered and the breadth of it is something that will be of interest to them?
Well, I think that we took this on board when we structured it, and that is one of the groups that we are targeting, because whereas that they are skilled in certain aspects of technology, they may not be skilled in certain aspects of taxation and how they fit together. And in particular in MTD, there is a lot there that they would need to be able to pick up on. So yes, there is stuff for them. As Shan said, we've built in annual revisions at least to deal with what is a very, very fast-moving area. And I think it's one of the things we as CIOT need to do is sit down and look at how this can begin to move out. And it may well be that we say, let's start thinking about putting together some form of training that can be specifically related to tax for technologists.
I also want to add, tax technology really isn't a set area.
No, it's not.
I've never seen a job spec that actually the same for tax technology. So even if you're working in tax technology right now, you might not see everything that's possible in this area, or maybe not even applicable in the area you're working on right now. But this syllabus is designed to cover as much as we could to include everything that we can think of being in tax technology. But I suppose, and instead, we're going to update it as the technology improves or changes going forward, and you will have to incorporate that change. So it's never going to be a dull moment. It's never going to be set in stone either.
That's fantastic, and there's lots of modules as well, so there must be something in there for everybody. Well, I'm conscious of the time at the moment, so thank you to Ian, Paul and Shan for your insights and thoughts today, and for answering the questions as well. It's fantastic, and we've brought forward the launch, due to your efforts really in putting this diploma in tax technology together and making it real.